So I have with me now a familiar face to television for many years, which includes being part of the presenting team of not only How, but How To as well as presenting the local news in the Meridian region, and more recently hosting Murder Casebook. It's Fred Dinenage. Hello.
Hello, Jack. How are you?
Not too bad, thank you. Yourself?
Good. How's life in God's chosen city?
It's not too bad at the moment.
Good. Yes, I started on the very first How, the original How, which started in 1966.
Wow.
Which was the brainchild of a very, very outstanding broadcaster called Jack Hargreaves. It was originally we did a pilot show for what was originally going to be an adult program, funnily enough. And on the sort of pilot program we did, I got absolutely everything wrong. I was knocking things over. Everything was utter chaos. There was even a small fire. And so then he came back and said, we're going to do 6 of these programs for children, see how it goes on the network, which is lovely. So I thought, I've really got to improve on this. So I really stopped the joking around on the first program, and I was really serious, and I concentrated like mad, and I thought I'd done really well. And afterwards, Jack took me on one side and said, Fred, you've got it all wrong. I said, no, Jack, I got it right. He said, no, you didn't, Fred. He said, you were hired to be the prat, the fool on the program. So I thought, fine, typecasting, because I'm naturally a clumsy sort of person. So I just reverted to type and got everything wrong, and it seemed to go down quite well. And that show lasted in the end until, I think, 1979, 1980. So it lasted for years, and it was wonderful fun. And then, amazingly enough, a few years later, up came How To, with originally Gareth Jones, Gaz Top as he was in those days, and Carol Vorderman was on the first couple of series. So, and that ran for a few more years as well. So How and How To has been very much part of my life, really, and I've loved every minute.
Sounds like it was a lot of fun, really, and despite being clumsy, it worked, and you had many happy years.
Oh, it's fantastic. We used to sit in that set, both on How and How To, and I think to myself, this is unbelievable. I'm having such fun, and I'm getting paid for it. Not a fortune, but lovely. It couldn't have been better. It was getting paid for enjoying yourself, Jack, and what more can you ask?
You can't really ask for more than that, can you, really?
No.
So you've had a career that's spanned over 50 years. That's quite incredible.
Brian Connolly, the comedian, said on our nighttime show down here in the South a couple of years ago, he said, it's amazing, Fred, anyone could have lasted so long with so little talent. Harsh but fair. I think he was joking. I hope he was.
I hope he was as well. So out of the two, the original How and How To, do you have a favourite, a preference, or were both of them as enjoyable as each other?
They were as enjoyable as each other in different ways. I mean, How To was much more scientific, some very ambitious items as well. I love both programs, to be honest. I couldn't pick between the two, and I wish it would come back as How 3. Only this time I would be Jack Hargreaves, of course. The old man of the team.
I said to Gareth, actually, in the other interview, I said it would be fantastic if it came back for a new generation, especially with, how technologically advanced we are now since the original How To finished.
Well, I would love it. I keep dropping hints to the controllers at ITV, but so far no good. But you never know. How 3 might yet come back, hopefully before I'm in a care home.
Fingers crossed. So across the two shows, was there ever a How that you did that sticks in mind as a favourite?
The one I will never forget, although it wasn't a favourite, but it's still shown now on YouTube and various, it'll be all right on the nighttime programmes. Years and years ago, in the original How, we did this How called How Can You Always Float in the Dead Sea? Because, of course, the Dead Sea is full of salt. So what they did was they built this huge tank, like a sort of mini swimming pool in the studio, and they filled it full of salt. And they dropped me into it from a great height, wearing a pair of Speedos at the time because they were fashionable. I dropped into it, and unfortunately they'd stuck so much salt in this blooming tank that I sank straight to the bottom. I was trapped in this salt and I couldn't get out. And for a few seconds, it looked and felt as though I was actually drowning in the blooming thing, until they realized I was on the bottom and couldn't get out. And they finally fished me out in one piece, thankfully. But that was the How, which even I can remember it even now. It's coming back to me as I'm talking to you, being stuck on the bottom of this tank. So I was almost the first person to drown in the Dead Sea.
That sounded like it was quite scary.
It was. But there were lots of other incidents, but that is the one that sticks most clearly in my mind.
Yeah, I imagine with a show like that where you're doing lots of demonstrations, lots of experiments, mishaps and accidents happened all the time.
They did. And with Jack Hargreaves, the original inventor of the original HOW, Jack always smoked a pipe. He's the only person I've ever met who was allowed to smoke in the studio. And Jack always said, well, it's a prop. I've got to have this pipe because everybody, like on all the countryside programs he did, like Out of Town, which ran for years, he was always smoking a pipe. So he'd come in the studio with the pipe lit. And lots of the shows in those days were live. So he'd have one going in his mouth and a couple more in his pocket, all loaded up, ready for when the first one ran out. So you'd see him stick the pipe in his pocket when the first one he thought had run out and light up another one. Unfortunately for him and for us, often the one he'd stuck in his pocket hadn't quite gone out. So suddenly you'd look down, because Bunty James, who was the original female presenter, and I would look down and we'd see this little fire coming from Jack's pocket. He was actually on fire. So you'd see a scene hand crawling across the ground with a jug of water, which when the camera was off Jack, he'd then pour it into Jack's pocket and put him out. And that happened on more than one occasion, which explained why Jack Hargreaves never had a jacket which didn't have pockets that didn't match.
I suppose it was the days before health and safety, really. And I often wonder, actually, could a show like HOW or How To be done in this day and age of health and safety the same way it was back then?
Well, you'd have to have lots of people with fire extinguishers around, but I'm sure it could be done. I'm sure it could be done. And if anyone from ITV management is listening now, I'm free and relatively inexpensive.
I'm sure that you'll be the first person they contact.
I hope so, Jack. I really hope so.
Definitely be great if you come back. I mean, like I said, when HOW finished in the early 80s, I bet you didn't think for a minute it would come back. And not only that, run for just as long as the original show, something like 15, yes. 16 years.
Yes, it did. No, I couldn't believe it. And on the sort of reintroduction of HOW as How To, again, it was a lot of fun. Gareth was extraordinary because he was the sort of daredevil of the team. Carol Vorderman, who was later replaced by other equally talented ladies, and the show just ran and ran and ran, and it was just fantastic. It really was.
Did look like great fun. Actually, Gareth told me an amusing story about a cuttlefish that you never let him forget about.
No, because these cuttlefish mustn't be disturbed, otherwise they let off all this ink, which completely obliterates them. And Gareth, unfortunately, I think he bang against the cuttlefish tank. Certainly, he made a loud noise, and the cuttlefish let off the ink. And it was some hours, I think, before we managed to record that particular item, as I recall. But Gareth had become me. He'd become the kind of joker of the team. And that was the producer wasn't too happy about it, but we got over it.
Yeah, I'm sure there was lots of backups and that kind of thing happens quite regularly in the world of television.
It does. Mishaps all the time, and it's how you deal with them. But we always had a laugh about it, and that's why people, to this day, people come up to me in the street and raise the right hand and say how. They always think they were the first. If I had £1 for every time that someone has said how to me in the street, I'd be a rich man. But people say to me, "Oh, don't you get sick of that?" And I said, "No, I'll never get sick of it. One day they won't do it anymore, and I'll be really hacked off."
Definitely. I'm sure if I crossed you in the street, I'd probably do exactly the same.
I'm pleased to hear it, Jack. I'm pleased to hear it.
Yeah, definitely. Aside from HOW and How To, did you present any other children's programmes?
I'm trying to think. I don't think I did. Originally, the first show I ever did on Southern television in 1964 was a program called Three Go Round, which was me and two girls. I remember it quite well. It was like a forerunner of Blue Peter, if you like. And the two girls, one of them was called Diane Keane, who went on to become a very famous actress. and is still acting to this day. And the other was a girl called Britt Allcroft, who never really wanted to be a performer. She always wanted to be a producer. And she eventually got the rights to Thomas the Tank Engine, which she produced for many years. And she's now a multimillionairess living, I think, in Los Angeles. So of the three of us, you could say I was the one that didn't quite make it.
Well, you did in your own way.
Yes, in my own small way.
Yeah.
But I've had a lifetime out of TV, Jack, and I'm really grateful. I've loved every minute, you know.
Fantastic stuff. The one thing I have to mention as well, a couple of years ago there was a programme on ITV, and it was about CITV's 30th anniversary. And I recall you and Gareth were interviewed for the show. And I have to say, actually, that was probably my favourite part of the documentary, because both of you seem to have such fantastic fondness and happy memories of the show. It was really, I think it was my favourite part of that whole programme.
Well, I must say, working with him, Gareth, was such a joy. He's such an incredibly talented young man. And we got on really, really well. We became such good friends, which doesn't always happen, you know, obviously in any kind of business. But we really did become very good friends, and still are to this day. And these days he does some acting as well. So I still see him, you know, lovely memories.
Definitely. And what was it like working with Gail McKenna as well, who presented alongside you for quite a while?
Oh, Gail was absolutely brilliant. She was because to replace Carol Vorderman was no easy task. I think a couple of other girls did try, but didn't quite work. But then along came Gail, and she was outstanding, absolutely outstanding. She really understood the whole ethos of how and how to, and she was brilliant, absolutely brilliant.
Yeah, the other girls you mentioned between Carol and Gail there was Sean Lloyd and Gail Porter, if I remember right.
Yes, both lovely ladies. I've seen Sean Lloyd recently on I can't think what it's called, but they're the sort of half a dozen ladies in Greece, I think, looking for love. And that's very watchable. She was a lovely lady, and Gail Porter too was just. They're all great presenters, Jack. You know, I was lucky to work with them all.
You do seem very, very proud of the show, both versions.
Oh, absolutely, yeah, very lucky indeed.
Fantastic stuff. Well, I want to ask you more about your more recent projects since How To. And obviously you've been a presenter on the news for quite a number of years, haven't you?
Yes, I've done, it's a show called ITV Meridian. It's a 6 o'clock show in the south of England. You've got Central TV where you are, Bob Warman and co.
Yeah.
I've been doing that for over 30 years. I'm still doing it to this day, and still enjoying live TV, you know, at 6 o'clock in the south of England. Plus, I got very lucky and done various sort of crime programs for Sky as well, Murder Casebook and The Evil Killers, etc. So it's been quite a varied selection of programs, really. I've been very lucky.
Definitely. I was going to touch upon the documentaries, actually, because I've watched quite a number of them, and they're still being aired now. And it was only last week I was watching one, and I can't remember who it was about now, but I was watching one, and I turned to my mother and I said, "Isn't it funny? I grew up watching him doing children's television, and now he's doing programmes about serial killers. That's a change in direction."
It was, and it still is, because I'm still doing those programmes to this day. And that really began... I wrote the autobiography of the Kray Twins, Reggie and Ronnie Kray, about 30 odd years ago. And really the whole crime thing started because of that, you know. And that just became, that started completely by accident, because we'd done an item on the 6 o'clock news program in the South. That time it was TVS, Television South. The program was called Coast to Coast. And we did this story about a dad. He lived at Gosport in Hampshire, and his daughter had a life-saving transplant, and he wanted to show his appreciation of the hospital by raising money for them to buy equipment they couldn't get on the NHS. so we ran this story, and a few days later, I got a letter stamped HMP Parkhurst, and in it was a letter from Reggie Kray, one of the infamous gangsters in the East End of London in the 50s and early 60s. And Reggie said, "Oh, we watched the program at Parkhurst, and I was very moved by this story of the father raising money. We've got lots of talented artists in Parkhurst Prison. I could get you some paintings. They could be auctioned and raise some money for this particular charity." And sure enough, a few weeks later, half a dozen paintings arrived, really good ones, plus one done by Reggie himself of two boxers in a ring, which was fairly amateurish to look at, but that was the one that sold and resold many times over the years. And that particular auction, which was called the Rose Gallery, raised thousands of pounds for that particular charity. And I got another letter from Reggie Kray saying, "Oh, would you come and see me sometime in Parkhurst?" which was an invitation you couldn't refuse. And I met him, and we got on well. And he said, "Me and my brother, Ronnie, are looking for someone to write our autobiography. Do you know anybody who can do it?" And I found that I've never written a book before, but I found myself saying, "Well, I could do it." And eventually, after about 3 years, I wrote their life story. And really, the crime programs came as a result of that. So it's been a fairly varied sort of life, really.
Very varied, and what a story. That's incredible. So you become good friends with them over time?
Yes, we became good friends, and obviously when I knew them, they were slightly older gentlemen by then. But I spent a lot of time with both Reggie and Ronnie. Reggie in Parkhurst and various other prisons, and Ronnie in Broadmoor Hospital in Berkshire. So we spent a lot of time together, and eventually the book was written.
That is an incredible career, very varied.
Well, I've enjoyed it, Jack. And the icing on the cake is I get to talk to people like you and tell them all about it.
Oh, thank you very much. And let's hope it continues for many more years.
God bless you, Jack. And that, as a very old presenter used to say, is how for now.